Hey everybody, it's Corey with Natural Born Tillers. Thanks for joining us in this next installment of our series in exploring sustainable food in Georgia. Today we're talking about what might be the most important topic of all, weed control. There's a dirty little secret about organic agriculture. It's hard. You might imagine yourself walking amongst your plants kind of in a perfect balance of nature, but the reality is a lot different than that. Your plants are kind of like domesticated animals. They can't exist in the wild without you, so you have to care for them, and when it comes to weeding, you have to care for them early and often. You might have done everything possible to get your soil right. You might have protected against insects and diseases. You might have a great planting strategy. You might even be ready for some awesome season extension. But if you don't take care of the weeds, all of your progress can be hijacked within a few short weeks. So first we need to know, what is a weed? And really simply, a weed is just a plant that's in a place where we don't want it. And typically you might think of weeds as something that you can't eat in a garden row of something you can eat. But a weed can really be any plant that's just in a place where you don't want it to be. Nothing will take the winds out of your sail faster than a row full of weeds. You start in the spring really optimistic, but by August your garden can be choked. And so we're going to help you with some strategies to get ahead of everything and make sure that you get your garden off to the best possible start. I like to break it down into three main groups. So I like to kill the babies, I like to break the bank, and I like to secure the perimeter. When I say kill the babies, I mean just that. We want to eradicate weeds at their smallest size. If you let your weeds grow up and go to seed, then you've multiplied the problem. Also, if you get them small, they're much easier to take care of by mechanical means. Breaking the bank. When I say breaking the bank, I'm talking about the bank of weed seeds that are in your soil. So you have what you consider an account. You have all of these weed seeds that are lying dormant, ready to sprout up and ruin your day. We want to empty that account by any means possible. So we can do that by tillage, we can do that by keeping some of those seeds buried, and we can do that by destroying the seeds before they're viable. Another really interesting strategy for eradicating your weed seed bank is solarization. And basically what that is we just want to cook or sterilize the top few inches of soil. And we can do that simply by putting down some clear plastic and keeping it in place, especially during the hot months of the year, for about 4 to 6 weeks. Another great way for a home gardener to take care of weeds is to mulch. We find that very successful if your weed seeds don't have light and they don't have access to germinate. If you've mulched heavily with several layers of mulch, then you're going to be very successful. The ones that pick up through there are going to be few and far between, and they're easy to control. So make sure that you're utilizing mulch whenever possible. Not only does it help conserve water and moisture in your raised beds particularly, but it also helps keep control of the weeds. If you have a larger garden and you want to incorporate cover cropping, that is a great strategy not only to increase your yields and to increase your soil fertility, but it's also a great way to break up cycles of certain weeds. So if you're growing different cover crops during different times of the year, those will kind of smother out some of the more noxious weeds that you're dealing with and enable you to kind of get around some of the timetables that those weeds are utilizing to grow aggressively in your garden. And finally, we want to secure the perimeter. And that just simply means we want to keep the weed seeds that are blowing in from other parts of our garden away from the places where we're growing food. We bring weed seeds in on our clothes, on our shoes. It comes in by the air. So we want to do all we can to kind of isolate our growing areas to make sure that there's not more weed seeds populating the garden. The most inefficient way to control weeds in your garden is to hand weed large weeds. So when we're taking care of small weeds and baby weeds, we want to use some sort of mechanical tool that'll speed our progress. So we're going to show you a couple of those and demonstrate. One is a stirrup hoe, and that is just simply a thin blade of metal that we scuffle along just the surface of the soil to disrupt any weed seeds or any small baby weeds germinating. If we do that early enough around our crops, then that'll prevent problems later on. All right, we're here with Daniel Parson. He is the farm manager of Oxford Organic Farm. Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about your operation here? It's a beautiful farm.
Oh, thank you. So we're at the Oxford College Farm, and we've got an 11-acre property here that was given to the college by an alumnus and turned into a farm in 2014.
Daniel, you've been farming for a little while, right? You have some experience with this. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, so next year it'll be 25 years. In 1998, wow. I graduated with a biology degree and went to live and work on an organic farm in Dawsonville, Georgia. Went back to Clemson for a master's. From there, went to Atlanta, was at Gaia Gardens, and then in South Carolina at Parson Produce, and now here. And so I've bounced around, and since I've been here almost 9 years, and I've gone from now I've farmed longer than my students have been alive, so.
Wow. So
that's a milestone that I've passed since I've been here.
25 years, have you learned everything?
No, I'm learning more every day, and you know, and I realize how little I actually know, but you know, it is something that experience counts a lot, because there are lots of situations that arise, and so more and more every situation I've seen something like it before. But inevitably, I mean, at least once a month, there is something that happens that has never happened before.
Today we're talking about weed control, and I'm glad we're interviewing you because you're a master of weed control. And I know every organic farm is weed free for the most part. Tell us a little bit about your approach to weed control.
Well, you may know Mark Schoenbeck, who talks about all topics. He said one time, if you have insect pests, disease, or weeds, if somebody were to wake you up in the morning and say, there's a problem, the problem to be would be weeds. We have more tools to deal with weeds than any other issue.
It's the most solvable problem.
It's the most solvable problem, but organic farmers always rate it as a #1 problem because it's relentless. You're going to till up the soil, you're going to expose weed seeds to the conditions they need to germinate, you're going to have weeds.
Right.
So you got to deal with them. And the way we approach it is knowing that we space our crops so that our weeding tools can fit in between them. We space the in-row spacing as well so that our weeding tools can get in between them. And then we plan for it.
Yeah.
So if we plant a crop, 2 weeks later, we're going to be in there weeding it. And we know that, we can forecast it. So that's kind of our approach. And then we like to weed things twice. So we do that first pass when the weeds come up like a carpet, and then we come back a couple weeks later, get all the ones we missed, plus the new ones that have come up. And a lot of crops, that's all it needs.
So we target this for mostly home gardeners. We want to use like our organic farming techniques and kind of translate it for people at home. Anything that you can think of that people should know?
So one mistake that people make, I made, is that you start thinking, well, maybe some weeds are good. Well, no, just eliminate them. That'll eliminate competition. If you want some other plant there, you can plant something else nearby.
Okay.
The other thing is there's no weed too small to weed out. So my best day of weeding is a bright sunny day where there's a thin crust on the soil and the weeds are just tiny. You've almost got to get down on your hands and knees to see them.
Yeah.
And that's the time to get them. So there's no weed too small. And then the other thing I always tell our students when we're learning to weed is I show them where the growing point of the plant is. And so that's really important, because if you don't get it below the growing point, that weed's just going to come right back. So if you just get the tops, it's not doing anything.
I got you, okay. And I see you left some weeds here for us, so we're gonna maybe weed some of this bed and see what we can do?
Just for you, we left a few weeds. That's right.
Okay, right, so Daniel, we got some tools here. Tell me what we're working with.
These are my two favorite weeding tools, and the third would be the wheel hoe. But the wheel hoe is a stirrup hoe mounted on a wheel.
Okay.
And this is the #1 weeding tool here at the college farm. This is a stirrup hoe, and it oscillates, so it's not loose. That's the way it's designed, and it has a curve to the blade, and that's so that when you're close to the plant, your blade is at the most shallow point. And when you're further away from the plant, it's going to be deeper in between the rows or in between the plants. And it oscillates back and forth so that when it flips up, you pull it. When you pull it, it flips up, and the angle of the blade actually pulls it into the soil. And then when you push back the other way, and it cleans itself out as you go back and forth. And so you can go really fast with these. They've got this edge that's easy to see, so you're not killing your plants. And it's a tool that anyone can use. This other one is a collinear hoe, also called a Coleman hoe, because Elliott Coleman really popularized it. And it's got a long handle, so you can use it with your thumbs up. It's got a straight, thin blade for that shallow cultivation that we've been talking about. And I really like it for certain applications where you want to have that whole flat blade engaged in the soil.
And you said blade, I think that's an important point. These are cutting tools, so you have to keep them sharp, right?
Exactly. We sharpen our hoes almost every time we use them. But yeah, sharper hoe will work much better. So, I don't know, should we get down to business then?
Let's take care of it. The best growing advice I ever received was from an old timer that had a 1/4-acre garden up the road from my farm. And he would come by and check out what I was doing, and we would talk, and I would talk about all the things that were happening on the farm and all the weeds and all the disease and everything I had to do. And he just turned to me at one point and said, "Corey, don't worry about the mule, just load the wagon." Well, when you're literally in the weeds, it can seem like you're going backwards. So loading the mule means just getting buried in the work, just focusing on the task at hand. If you're like me, the hardest thing to do is to create that inertia, to get off of the thinking phase and into the doing phase. Your job is just to load the wagon. The mule will know when to go. So, plant a seed, watch it grow, weed a row, take care, and eat well.